We have an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J. Andy Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I am your host, Dr. J. Co-hosting with me live in London is Johnny Webb, where it happens to be 3 a.m. Today, as always, we have a superstar show for you today, but today is an extra special show because we have another superstar. You guys have heard several celebrities. You've heard on government officials. You heard, of course, the former defense minister. Paul Heller has been on, 5 times in the last year and a half. You heard 2 astronauts. By the way, Story Musgrave is up live on Dr. J Radio Live, the YouTube channel. You've heard just about everybody. And each time, whether it be a congressman, a senator, former presidential candidate, an astronaut, there seems to be more attention put to this subject. And that is exactly why I invited today's guest to be on the show. And that happens to be the one and only superstar Jack Osborne. Mr. Osborne, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I don't know about superstar. That might be embellishing.
Well, to me, you are. Let me tell you why. Because you are bringing awareness. You are sticking your neck out there. There's only a handful that I know. Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, is out there talking about this. Tom DeLonge from Blink-182. They're the lead singer of Hollywood Undead, Jordan Terrell. These guys are the only ones that I know that are actively talking about this, aside from the government officials I mentioned. So
Don't forget Dan Aykroyd.
Dan Aykroyd, that's right. And thank you for reminding me. And David Cerrito, the guy who interviewed him for Dan Aykroyd Unplugged, UFOs Unplugged, he was on not too long ago talking about that. So thank you for reminding me. Again, we usually do a UFO news segment. I don't want to waste the time with you, but I want to say 2 things. First of all, by the way, what happened what's going on recently is I've been saying the news reports are so full, I cannot keep up with them to give you, the listeners, what's happening. But let me just tell you 2 pieces of news. First of all, the June report, it says UFO sightings for the month of June doubled worldwide. What is going on? And the second piece, all the last 2 years, everybody's been hearing these sounds coming out of the sky, trumpets, weird shrilling noises, shrieking noises. Well, just today, there happened to be another one caught in Indonesia. Thousands of people heard it. Is this just like the revelations of, something happening, that the trumpets, or is it an interpretation of something happening with the extraterrestrials, just as in the Bible references Eric von Däniken talks about? So many people used their local terms to describe what was something else. That being said, Jack, why do you think we're having so much activity? I mean, these are just the craziest times that I've ever seen in literally 31 years that I've been paying attention to this topic. What do you just think personally?
I think it's a couple things. I think maybe, the question is, are more things happening, or do people have more devices now to start recording stuff and take pictures? Everyone's walking around with a camera in their pocket because of phones. So are people just able to take pictures and, record sound and video now a lot more easily? So it's kind of I often wonder that.
I agree with you that though. Let me tell you though. I said the same thing, and that explains why there's more footage, and also more military planes are probably being tested. I'm sure if we've been sitting on extraterrestrial crash disks for 70 to 100 years, we probably figured out a way to make something. So that's one angle. Right?
I have no doubt, and I also think probably a large portion of UFOs are military tech.
Yes.
I would probably go as far as to say at least a third of them, in my opinion. Especially in America.
Yes. I would think it's even a little bit higher, but the report it wasn't that more videos were caught. It was that just more sightings in general worldwide. Yeah. Double than normal. And for weeks we've been reporting on individual cases, and it just boggles my mind. Are we really on the cusp of something or not? But let me backtrack to this. In case everybody out there, this is a little secret that we're going to share with you. I met Jack a little over a year ago when my dear friend Roger Lear performed his last implant removal surgery. I had no idea he was interested in UFOs. And Jack, what led you to be interested? Before you answer that question, let's get to the surgery. What led you to actually get to that surgery and be present? Because you were super interested in what was happening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know that, because of, the documentaries coming out now, and it was kind of a big week on, with Coast to Coast, with Corbell talking about his movie and Patient 17 coming on. I was there and I witnessed the surgery. And kind of what led me to that has been, UFOs, extraterrestrials, astronomy have always been passions of mine since I was a kid. I was in the late 90s when everyone was going kind of Roswell mad, and the movies were coming out, and and then there was the Phoenix Lights and all that. Like that to me, those are probably some of my most kind of fond memories of a child, just being so just enamored with extraterrestrials and the thought of there could be aliens in another world and they could be visiting us, and it really all started when I was probably around 10 or 11.
The Phoenix Lights, I gotta say, that was a super spectacular sight, because you have a mile-wide craft, and clearly it's not just individual lights. You could tell it's one big object, especially in certain angles caught, not to mention the 10,000 plus people that talked about it. But just as importantly, it was repeated again this past February. The difference is no mainstream media covered it.
Mm.
I just thought that was astonishing. You have the same incident, a mile-wide craft hovering slowly, without sound, across the Arizona Valley and Phoenix, and yet nobody covers it.
Yeah, no, I mean, now we can start putting on the tinfoil hat, but look who's controlling the media.
That's right.
Big corporations. Big corporations are controlling the government. It's a whole, they run the R&D I mean, listen. The sheer fact that Disney is owned by General Electric, that makes bombs, airplanes, and miniguns.
That's
it's
right.
It's all that pyramid.
It's a scary, scary thought, actually. I didn't know Halliburton was part of the prison systems. I knew they were funding all of the military, from shoelaces to bullets, but they really got a stranglehold on us. Now, a while ago, I was telling you about this amazing researcher who's been doing this for 4 decades now. His name is Grant Cameron. He used to be the specialist of presidents and UFOs, and he went back and literally he was the only person to ask the most brilliant question of anybody up there. He had a chance to call in a radio show and speak to Dick Cheney. He never asked him, is UFOs real or anything like that. If you ever run into a politician, you want to ask the one and only true question: have you been briefed by UFOs? Do you know what his answer was, Dick Cheney's was?
What?
He said, if I had been briefed, it would probably be classified and I wouldn't be talking about it. Now, is that plausible deniability or what?
Oh, I mean, that's in a nutshell. That's a perfect example of plausible deniability.
Yeah, I mean, he could have just said no. He said, no, I've never been briefed. But no, he went on to say, if I had been briefed. So I just thought it was fantastic. But now recently he's made a switch to consciousness and alien abduction, and he realizes that is the key. We don't need to study, UFO sightings or how they fly or videos. We want to study the people who actually have contact. Why? They're the guys with the answers. They're the guys that are interacting with these extraterrestrials. They're the ones that could tell us how they feel, how they talk,
They've had the first-hand experience. What we all sit around and speculate, they've experienced.
That's
theoretically. Right. I mean, as long as they're not nutcases making it all up. I'd like to think that the ones that are truthful and have evidence to prove that something phenomenal is happening to them.
That's where we have to separate the wheat from the chaff, and it's hard to do, but fortunately a lot of people are coming forward. Now, where I was revolving with Grant Cameron is he did a lecture saying that a lot of abductees are before birth. The number one prerequisite to be an abductee is that your parents were an abductee. One or more parents were. They go down family lines. And so he believes that a lot of musicians, and it's all over these songs, and he talks about so many artists from the 60s, 70s, and beyond, from John Lennon to your father even. I believe there was a big UFO sighting at a Black Sabbath concert.
There was a huge one, and it actually even made it on an episode of I think UFO Hunters.
Really?
Yeah, they did
tell us about that real quick.
So I want to say it was Chicago or Illinois. No, it's somewhere in the Midwest. during one of my dad's concerts, literally, I mean, there was 25, 30,000 people at this outdoor venue, all witnessed this craft fly over. It was right around dusk, and there was photographs. It was a big event. I mean, listen, if I was an alien, then I was like, hey, what are all these people doing watching this person jump around on a stage? This is interesting.
It's true.
It's like when you see all those lemurs like stand up in like the middle of a field and they're all just kind of standing there.
Interesting.
Plenty to pick from.
That's right. That's right. Now, when we did a brief interview about 20 minutes last year, I asked you what got you influenced in this, and you said that every time your father would come back from tour, he would bring you UFO books or movies. Do you think that maybe he had some incident in his past, or maybe your grandparents? Has anybody in your family had?
I think my dad's always been intrigued by the possibility, and we would always talk about it as a kid. And there was this one book that got given to my dad in a really kind of strange way. There's a book, like a boutique bookshop in LA, and when my dad was buying me a bunch of UFO books, apparently this guy behind the counter was like, "Yo, you into this? I have a book for you I want to give you." It's basically it was like an underground book, kind of. I never saw this thing again. It was called The Matrix, and it looked homemade, like someone had Xeroxed it, and it had, sketches of various types of beings, and it had all these, redacted documents, top secret documents. I would say 90% of the stuff in this photocopied, like homemade book that my dad got, I've never seen it replicated in any book since, even online. And I don't know where this thing came from, but this book to me was so fascinating and so it spun me out. I had stuff about Stonehenge and why Stonehenge was actually a portal and like kind of a bit of a Stargate type thing and all this crazy. And this was well before Ancient Aliens was ever on TV. I mean, we're talking 1996. My dad gave me this book. And so it was really that was and my dad he would always, I think he kind of made a bigger deal out of it. He's like, listen, I'll keep a hold of this book. When you want it, you just ask me and I'll get it for you. And he was, he kind of, I think he played up that, this is like a coveted document a little bit, but, it really captivated my, imagination and my thoughts.
Do you have access to that book?
It's somewhere in England. I could get it. Next time I'm in England, I'll see if I can dig it out from somewhere. But it's to call it a book, I think is giving too much credit to what books are. I mean, it's literally like Xeroxed documents kind of bound together. That's it.
There's two experts, a father and son team. They're known as the worldwide experts on verifying documents. It's Dr. Bob Wood and his son Ryan Wood. They testified at the citizen hearing. I would love if you get your hands on that for them just to take a look at some of these documents. Let me ask you about the redacted released files from CIA and NSA. Don't you think it's just fascinating how it was nothing but a date and then 99% blacked out paper, with marker? Why the heck even release a paper like that? It's just mind boggling. It's a waste of time.
Right. I mean, I think because it's that thing, it's to stall the process. Yeah. It's like, oh, well, Freedom of Information Act, sure, we'll give you the document. Well, look, we gave you the document. We just had to black everything out. Well, then you have to file another Freedom of Information Act and then another one. It's to drag it out. The government, if there's one thing the government is really efficient at, it's not being efficient.
Yes. And you're absolutely right, especially this government, and the greedier it gets. We have such a high tax rate. You have, Obama, his campaign in 2008 was the world's most expensive ever at $1 billion. And he's in his lame duck period. And what is he doing constantly? Him and his family are just fake. Or Air Force One goes out. They send literally a small army to secure the area. So you got people starving on the streets, and then you got the first lady with the first children spending time in Italy and Venice and I don't know where their next stop is now, somewhere in France if I'm not mistaken. But point being is things are a little screwed up.
Just to say the least. I mean, we're living in strange times. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what political party you believe in, what faith you follow. I mean, I think the one thing we can all agree on is that this is strange times.
About a little over a week ago, we had that chat, and then I thought it was just so fascinating. I decided to record it. I haven't released it yet. If you say we should, we should. But
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just a just a little off the cuff brainstorm.
Well, it's ironic because I didn't plan on it. I just planned on talking, a few minutes, and we just got into it because there's just so much information on this.
Yeah.
I talked about the movie Thrive. Did you get a chance to see it?
I did, absolutely. Yeah, I've actually watched it twice now.
Really? No,
Yeah.
no. The guy, Foster Gamble, who produced it, was on 2 months ago. He's actually going to be back in a couple weeks on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nassim Harriman was on last month, and he's going to be back on. He's going to be back soon. And I wanted to get your take on the entire movie, just from beginning to end, from the way it connected the dots. And what did you think of Nassim Harriman's theories that really the implications are what was science fiction this morning is just thrown away this afternoon, the moment we can use these theories.
Well, absolutely. I mean, listen, it's, I think they even use it in the film. There was a group of people who said the world was round while the rest of the world said the world was flat.
Yep.
And until they proved the world was round, they were considered lunatics and they should be locked up. I mean, there was the doctor that came, his name escapes me, but the doctor that conceived the notion that germs existed. He was literally locked into a mental asylum. And then some years after he died, then everyone was like, well, actually, yeah, these little microscopic things we can't see could be what's making people sick. So it's, we don't know what we don't know, and we only know what we know.
Exactly. And I think he did such a fascinating job by linking everything and then fact-checking it all. He spent more money fact-checking. And obviously, this is a pure philanthropist. Instead of making this for profit, what does he do? Multi-million-dollar film, boom, out there for free. Yeah,
because at the end of the day, he sees the bigger picture, and that's what I think is really commendable. He's looking at this from 10,000 feet. He's not looking at it from his bank account.
Yes.
And he sees that, the more people you can educate on the way the world really is and how we can make it better, I think that's incredibly powerful. I would love to see that movie get amazing.
And it's 20 plus languages so far, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, that's phenomenal. And it's that. People said McDonald's was good for you. Now you look and it's like they're closing McDonald's down left and right because everyone saw through the BS. It's all smoke and mirrors. So, it's one of those things where slowly but surely you just got to keep chipping away. You keep chipping away at a wall. Eventually it's going to crumble down. And it's, I think that I hope in my lifetime we will see a paradigm shift. And we will see a shift of power from these big corporations and these large government entities that are controlling, how we receive, education and, and experience, the world and the reality of, ultimately, it's the reality of our dimension, which is being infringed upon.
Yes. I wholeheartedly agree. And I honestly hope that we just can bring awareness because, I was just passively observing this stuff and researching just since I was a kid. That literally some of my earliest memories are with regards to, honestly, my parents are Greek immigrants. They came from little tiny villages, no electricity, no running water. So I never had an allowance. They wanted me to work. So since 5 years old, I was, busting tables at the restaurant and the family restaurant. And 9 years old, I was placed behind the cash register. So they needed me to learn the value of $1 from the moment I learned to speak English, which was when I was 5. And what happened is the first thing I buy is I happen to be looking through the classified ads, and I see a guy who's selling UFO movies. So I'm making weekly trips to buy every UFO documentary this guy has, and it took me about a year before I got this collection. And that just goes to show my obsession going on there, and before I finally took on an active role. If we don't educate, we're never going to get a word across. And each person that speaks out really is inspiring others. Now, let me ask you this. Do you know of anybody else that, other than who we mentioned, who is closeted, speaks out on this? Because I know I could tell you this publicly because when I was working with Third Phase of the Moon, the people from Whoopi Goldberg reached out to us asking for exclusive content and to see some footage. And we said, give us an interview. And she said, sorry, I can't. The View won't let me. And we were kind of blown away at that, but that just goes to show there's one more person really interested. Do you know of any that are interested?
I think there's a lot of people. I mean, I know, the guys from the band Tool are very, they're very interested in this stuff. I mean, they have actually in one of their songs they used a recording from Art Bell on Coast to Coast years ago, and they're intrigued. A lot of, musicians, I think, inherently, because I think as the type of artists that they are, musicians' minds wander and they're thinkers at the end of the day. I know a lot. I've had a lot of great conversations, with Marilyn Manson. He's kind of more into the, he was at one point he was very interested in more kind of occultist type stuff and spirituality and kind of the clash between good and evil. Like that was his, had a lot of great kind of philosophical conversations with him years ago about that.
I think it's all connected. I honestly think it's all connected.
I absolutely do.
When you think about good and evil, it goes all the way from theology to humankind, to humanity, to, I would imagine it extends to literally every other life form out there until they are wise enough to evolve and realize, hey, you got to stop killing each other or whatever it be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think if an alien race really wanted to reveal itself to us, they clearly have the power. I honestly think they're not doing it on a large scale because they go, well, you're all just still knuckle dragon kind of, baboon hybrids. Like we're all. I mean, we're not. I mean, what is it? Michio Kaku says we're not even a tier 1 culture.
That's right. He says we are a type 0, type 0 culture, and at the same time, the sad part is that not only are we a type 0 culture, that the internet is fortunately a type 1 civilization. That's the way he put it. And of course, when we can get to that type 1, we will get to traveling through our solar system. Type 2 is terraforming and intergalactic travel. But hopefully we'll get there as long as we could stop killing each other. If we were looking from the outside in, what would you see? I mean, we're a scary bunch of people.
We're scary, but I think that at the end of the day, we're more beautiful than we are scary.
I believe that. I just hope we can get the rest of the world to follow suit. There's that sad show, First 48, as you know, that follows the homicide detectives around. I am just blown away at the lack of respect for life.
Yeah. Life is cheap to a lot of people, and I think once, man really values the kind of what the individual has, I think then, only then will things shift. I think as an entire race.
Yes, and I think that's when they might actually start to come, because what happens if they come now? I think all the gangsters will shoot them.
Yeah, totally. You'll have all these, controlling bodies of varying groups of faith coming up with their opinion, and they're going to try and put their stamp on it to what they think it is, and then you're going to have, rioting in the street, and you literally would have breakdown of society. I mean, like those scenes in Independence Day when everyone's just running, screaming. Like, I don't think that's necessarily far from what it would be like.
Yes, exactly. I don't think so either. I think there would be more people coming forward and more people embracing it than actually shooting it. But I think at the same time, there is that section that will shoot it. Mm-hmm. Now, what we talked about, in case we don't end up releasing that little impromptu chat, as you told a really fascinating story about your friend, and I was hoping that the listeners can get a dose of that story.
For sure. So, it's a pretty fascinating story. I used to be heavily into rock climbing, and I traveled the world. I mean, I rock climbed all over Europe and Asia, and tons of road trips in America to Yosemite and Bishop, and all these legendary kind of crags. And one of my very, very best friends, who was kind of my climbing mentor, was a guy from Britain named Mike. And he lived in Australia for a number of years. And one of his mentors was this very kind of rugged Australian, like outback living kind of, I actually lived in the Blue Mountains in Australia. And he was a real, I never met the guy, but he was always described as a real kind of straight up, kind of pragmatic, like, analytical climber, like, very, but earthy, but not overly spiritual. Didn't believe in aliens. Wasn't like a particularly like wasn't a God-fearing man or anything. And he told my friend Mike this story, that one day he went up to his bedroom and he went to take a nap. And he sat in like an armchair in his bedroom that looked out of his window out into kind of just rolling kind of, just bare land, nothing out there. And as he was dozing off, he felt someone touching him on his arm, like with a hand running down the side of his arm, almost as if, how you might go up to like your wife, or, your wife might do to you when you're sleeping, just gently kind of graze their hand down your arm. And as he reached to touch the hand that was touching him, he felt these long, he described them as long, scaly fingers. And his instant reaction was he grabbed the fingers and snapped them. Like, and rock climbers have incredibly strong hands. I mean, that's that's your tool when you're a climber.
Yes.
I have friends, I used to be able to do, 10 pull-ups on 2 fingers. Like,
wow.
When I was 19 and about 40 pounds lighter. But we have strong fingers and hands, and it's just, and
we rely on them.
Oh, absolutely. And he grabbed these long, scaly fingers, snapped them. As he opened his eyes, he saw this small creature run, jump out the window in front of him, and then shoot off into the air. But when he snapped the fingers, he said this creature let out the loudest, like, high-pitched squeal, and his wife downstairs, who was cooking dinner, heard it all. She heard, she heard screaming, she heard, like, feet stamping, like, running, and then she comes running up there. This gentleman was beads of sweat, completely terrified, had no idea what he saw, but, he believes that, something, he doesn't, he was like, I'm not saying it was alien, I don't know what it was, but something, a small creature with long fingers, that was upright on 2 legs, was touching him. He believes he broke its fingers, and it jumped out the window and shot up into the air.
That is extremely scary when you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of, honestly, what kind of being, first of all, has the ability to fly,
yeah.
right? And second of all, and this is also this brings me to my other point. So you said he's not a spiritual guy.
Nope.
Obviously, he knew this thing wasn't human. It didn't look human. What if there was a craft that landed and you have these beings look out? What are the skeptics going to do? Are they going to say, hey, finally aliens are here? Or are they going to say, nope, that's our military craft with our genetically engineered humanoids?
Yeah, droid, new kind of drone humans. I think people will always make of something what they will. 90% of people tend to believe what the talking box tells them. And, the remaining 10%, I tend to believe, there's that kind of, that 10% window where everyone kind of will find what makes most sense to them.
Yes, exactly. But the only good thing I have to say is that's true. But I think that percentage is starting to shrink because the awareness and the percentage of people that are starting to believe is really so much higher out there than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. On that level, I think we're good. And what a lot of these contactees, abductees, I mean, this is just based on these literally hundreds, it's definitely in the thousands at this point, definitely well over 1,000 people who have had contact that I've directly spoken to myself over the last 5+ years that literally talk about the fact that they're given messages that when more than half of the earth believes that unequivocally that we are being visited, not that life exists somewhere else, but that we have been visited, are being visited, then they'll start to show more openly. And
yeah.
I'm wondering if that's the paradigm shift that's starting to happen with these enormous cases that are happening. And, as you heard before, just this past Tuesday, one of the news UFO reports that we gave was another UFO spotted over Stonehenge, just like you mentioned. Clearly, there's something that attracts them to these places.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think, well, for one, I think Stonehenge represents the beginning of civilization on the planet. From when it's so old, it goes back to like the early, when man first came together and went, you know what, we're no longer going to be these tribes. We're going to create society, and we're going to create community, and we're going to build and work together. Like that's a paradigm shift right there. When everyone was kind of hiding in their caves, and and there was no real, anything other than just, we were not much different from, any other animal. But once we came together and decided to grow crops and create community and build structures and, and learn and want to create technology, that's the kind of paradigm shift that's going to have to happen again to take us to that next level. But what will that be? Maybe it is, the kind of global understanding that we are not alone.
The awareness, the global awareness. Now, speaking of ancient sites, Stonehenge, and I'm sure you've seen so many other places. I'm sure you've traveled the world and seen a lot of these ancient sites, I'm assuming, right?
I have, yeah. I've been to quite a few, very old ancient sites.
What's your take on the fact that you have similarities on places where cultures at that time should have not had any ability to communicate with each other, and according to our official history, had no official communication? What's your speculation on the fact that you got pyramids in Japan, Egypt, South America, all over the world?
Maps of Antarctica under the ice,
yes.
That. I mean, to me, that's such a blatant. I'm sure someone could always say, oh, that's just, that pyramid, the reason why we built pyramids is maybe because that's just what people are meant to do. I don't know. But having a map that's however many hundreds of years old that shows what Antarctica looks like under the ice is, But anyway, back to your question. I don't think that this isn't the first time mankind has got to this point. I think mankind is far older than people believe. I think societies have existed a lot longer, and perhaps at one point these ancient civilizations had technology that was maybe given to them, or maybe they developed, and there was a way for communication and cross pollination. Ultimately, I mean, think of it like this: did you ever used to watch the show Life After Man?
Yes.
So you watch that show, and all these scientists, you theorize what a city will look like after a week of no people, a month, a year, 10 years, 100 years. It only takes 400 or 500 years for there literally to be zero evidence that humans were ever here.
Yes. And Jason Martell, he is one of the stars on Ancient Aliens.
I know Jason. Jason's actually how I ended up at the patient 17 surgery.
Ah, okay, that I didn't know. But so then that one of his theories is that we did have a super advanced human race here on top of them visiting us, that he thinks going back to 26,000 years, that had this technology and wisdom that somehow either died off, moved off, or maybe moved underground. He doesn't know where they went, but he believes that a lot of these sites and structures were created, like you said, by a human race, an advanced human race that is somewhere else or maybe died off or whatever it be.
Yeah. No, I believe it's totally plausible. I mean, I remember reading something about they think that there's gold mines that are 100,000 years old in Africa.
Well, actually, Michael Cremo, he goes by Forbidden Archaeologist, world famous guy. He lives right here in Southern California. And he was on the show not too long ago, and we were talking that I asked him what is the most amazing site that he found. He found a gold mine here in California that is 5 million years old with human bones in there. They're bigger. They're 8 to 9 foot tall, but they're definitely human, Homo sapien. What the heck can explain that?
How, is that? I want to. Okay, I need to see. I need to go there. Let's do an expedition. We're going.
By all means, I will absolutely set you up with him whenever you're ready. Johnny from London's got a question. Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, hi, Jack. I want to take you back to you were saying about being at the surgery with Dr. Reed and the implant taken out. Dr. Lear, excuse me. And my question was what were your thoughts on the possibility of people being taken and having implants? And do you think it's a God, angel, demon thing, or do you think it's an alien thing?
I think some people's experience could very well be the kind of god, angel, demon, like you're saying. I do think that there are interdimensional beings on a spiritual plane that we don't quite understand. It's kind of far beyond our kind of understanding at this point. And I also very much believe that humans are taken by extraterrestrial beings. I mean, would if mankind had the ability to leave our planet and go explore other worlds, do you not think that we would take creatures and we would take animals and perhaps some primitive beings and like grab them and be like, hey, what are you? Let's poke some holes in you and see what you do. Like, I think life on whether it's human life, alien life, whatever, I think we have a desire to learn, and I think that's a universal law. People beings are curious.
You're absolutely right. Stephen Hawking actually talks about that, and he actually warns us and says, stop sending signals to invite them here, because the universal rule is that the superior species will take advantage of the lower species. Yeah. We look what we did when Columbus came to North America. We killed off all the American Indians, or most of them. And then, of course, look what we're doing with frogs. And even though we're doing good to these animals, that they're scared when we're taking them and putting a tracking chip in them, or trying to take an arrow through them that was shot.
Look what we do to sharks. We take sharks from the ocean and we literally do what aliens did. We put a massive locator on them and like checking up on them every couple months. It's totally plausible, and as I was fortunate enough to literally be standing in the surgery when Dr. Lear was extracting the fragment, the implant, the chip. I was amazed. Like, I was like, wow, this is pretty powerful. I didn't know what it was. It looked like it could have passed as a piece of gravel stuck in someone's leg, but it was an interesting experience nonetheless.
Also, I noticed that with that particular video that you were both partisan to, I noticed that they talked about when they put detectors next to it, it was picking up different frequencies, and one of them was a NASA deep probe frequency. Can you elaborate on that at all?
They didn't really explain to me at the time as to what kind of frequencies. All I was told was that it was emitting, signals before. But then when it came time for the surgery, there was a lot of waiting around because they couldn't find it. I mean, we were waiting, in excess of an hour and a half before they even started cutting into patient 17. So it was. I was at one point. I was like, "Is this like what's happened? Like, how did it just disappear?" And then there was. People were talking, maybe he was taken again, and they took out the chip because they knew this was going to happen, and there was a lot of buzz in that waiting room, and it was kind of, frustrating. Yeah.
It absolutely was, and it boggles my mind that the object itself, and I've been privy to. I wasn't present at other surgeries, but I've been privy to. We've done a couple of documentaries of myself on Dr. Lear. I've held the implants in my hand. I've seen them, and we've been there studying them, spoken to the scientists and the people who had a chance to analyze them. And the fact that this thing is activated by our nerves, begs the question: what's it actually doing? Because when it's connected to us, it not only is it emitting a radio frequency, it's magnetic, and then of course the moment it's released, it doesn't have any of those qualities anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's clearly powered by our own energy, our life force. I mean, it's it's like that famous scene in The Matrix. He's like, he holds up the battery. That's what we are. I mean, we give off energy. We have,
electricity.
So it would make sense to create something that can pull off that energy. I mean, a more advanced race would do that in my mind.
I used to think that abductees were taken by these implants, but then a lot of people who have had them removed say they're still being taken. Sure. And they can move to literally across the world, and you just wonder, how are they finding them? So I started to evolve my thinking and starting to believe that these things do far more, and some people actually claim that they go above and beyond of reading thoughts to possibly even controlling you. Do you think that's a possibility?
You know what? we put drugs in our bodies now that make us do strange things. You know,
That's
it's
true.
like that we have that technology. I mean, you can give someone LSD and teach them how to speak a language in 24 hours. So, you know, you give people antidepressants to make them not depressed. So it would make sense that an extraterrestrial being could have a technology that could influence people's thoughts, actions, emotions, feelings, the whole gambit. Alternatively, though, what if these chips are kind of like little thumb drives, and these chips are recording, these extraterrestrials might be able to track you, but these chips are the things that are downloading your entire human experience.
Yes, everything from what you see, hear, feel. I could imagine that. I could definitely imagine that. I actually hear some stories that a lot of these people are taken on board, and they're shown in sort of like a holographic image, history of the Earth. One of them was even shown going back to Neanderthals, and then the progression of humans to basically give the implication that that particular species has been here since then, if not earlier.
Yeah.
That is a scary, scary thought, especially when some people say they've been here before the dinosaurs. Do you think it's possible that the reptilian race, as some people say, was actually evolved from the dinosaurs, or alternatively that they existed somewhere else, that they came here and the dinosaurs were created as sort of an experiment? They went awry, so they decided just to kill them off, and rather than having a natural fireball, a meteor that hit them.
Yeah, I mean, alternatively though, what if dinosaurs were the actual natural inhabitants of this planet, and these alien races went, actually, this planet is really awesome, it's got a great climate, there's tons of resources, but there's these giant lizards that try to eat us every time we go there. Let's just kill them all, and then we'll put our own, workforce there.
And that's a theory that a lot of people say. That there was a guest that hasn't been up in this show, that he goes around and he talks, that's his main theory, that the dinosaurs were killed by extraterrestrials. The dinosaur hunters is essentially what he deems them. I just think it's really fascinating. Let me ask you this. Of all the stories you've heard, can you pick some of the best cases that just stick out on your mind, that you just, not necessarily what you've seen, but what you've heard about?
So there's a few things. I mean, the first, kind of, we'll talk, let's start with kind of government stuff. I have friends who've had literal experiences with, the kind of men in black suits type thing, and being told, like, you're going down a strange road here, like, you need to back off, and they've had crazy, legitimate experience. And these were film producers back in the 90s that were, pursuing disclosure and getting the information out there, and they were hell-bent on making it happen, and they literally were told, just walk away, like, we're going to stop this at every turn, and things will start happening. And, I had friends that had, experienced, people all close to them dying randomly, people going missing and not turning up for years, and when finding them, they were kind of like, they had a mental breakdown and they've been locked up type thing. So I've heard stories like that, but then, it's funny. You were talking about redacted documents that the CIA released. My biggest thing is that, and it often goes unheard and not really probed much, but a lot of these secret installations, they're not operated by the CIA, they're not operated by the Air Force or the NSA. They're under the DOE budget. That's the Department of Energy.
Yes.
And the Department of Energy is such an ambiguous government agency, and their budget is like triple that of, anything close to it. And they're the ones running these installations, because, I mean, what better way to hide research into extraterrestrials than, we're looking for new alternative energy, so it's the Department of Energy's budget. I had friends that were on the Department of Energy search and rescue teams, and they were telling me about, the DOE SRT, that's the name of the team. They have the most lenient use of fire law restrictions out of any government agency. Because their job is to transport nuclear material around the country, to go retrieve nuclear material. If a nuclear facility gets taken over, their job is to repel an attack or, rescue the facility I mean, these guys are trained to the same standard as, SEAL Team 6 and Delta Force. And, I know a bunch of these guys that were on those teams, and just the stuff they tell me about how have mentioned in passing, not in great detail because they're not allowed to, but about how powerful the DOE is. I want to hear more people talking about that, and I want to see more probing into the DOE.
I was going to ask you, because I was thinking, what's your thoughts on the British government and the United States government, for that fact, on doing enough towards disclosure? A lot of the people that come here were all about disclosure. But do you think our governments are doing enough to bring this to light? And if not, other countries, they have their governments are open. They're always letting out their documents. Why do you think that our governments don't do that, Jack?
Because I think it's about control. I don't think the British government and the American government really want the populace in the know. They want us to fall in line. They want us to kind of, do what we're supposed to do, and that's get in debt, work till the day you die, and have your debt roll over to the next family member. Like, that's our job as citizens of, we're supposed to feed the machine through, essentially slave labor. And I think if we actually knew what was out there and what mankind has the potential of, I think it would, these powers that control things would, they wouldn't know what to do.
Do you think our British Queen is under influence by aliens? If it goes right to the top, and it's and even in your personal lifestyle, you must meet some top people. Yeah,
it's funny. Alex Jones talks a lot about the kind of these elite, these top echelon. And I've friends, friends of mine are members of the royal family. I know the princesses, and I don't believe that she is essentially. She comes from a bloodline. She comes from a bloodline that's been running Britain for a very long time. I know recently there's been evidence to dispute that she's actually the genuine heir to the throne, but nonetheless, she's running it. I think that she is in control of a lot, but I don't think it is to that level. I don't think it's some weird, sinister, like she's going to these rituals and that, they're communicating directly with, aliens, or she is a lizard. I don't think any of that necessarily is true. I think that starts.
But in the past, though, Jack, people have gone to Aleister Crowley meetings and things like that, and been, influential family bloodlines.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, listen, a good friend of mine's father was the chairman of the Bilderbergers for 10 years. Another good friend of mine, his father just got accepted into the Bohemian Grove. And I know these people, and I'm like, they're just straight up and down businessmen. But they're involved in that elite 0.01% of individuals that control these massive companies. And I think it's a lot more based on dollars and pounds than it is on some kind of sinister thing. But I think these people thrive on feeling that they're elite. And
great. I was just going to say, let's not forget, it's no secret that Prince Philip, who happens to be Greek, by the way, who's Elizabeth's husband, has been super open about his interest in UFOs.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have no doubt. I don't necessarily think I don't know if Prince Philip's necessarily privy to much UFO, activity, because he was married into the British royal family. But I do think the Queen, as far as controlling, having a say in how Britain is run, I think she's very, very involved.
You remember the citizen hearing on disclosure, which occurred in 2013?
I remember hearing about it. I don't remember, I can't off the top of my head.
Well, basically, it was about 40 witnesses, ranging from colonels to Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada, just to everybody, including a handful of researchers, testified in front of a mock congressional committee. Mm-hmm. And these members of Congress and the senator, former members of Congress, all came in skeptics, open minds, and over the 5 days of testimony, you can literally see the transformation of them saying it's possible. What about the speed of light, this and that, to fifth day, unequivocally saying that, one, we have been visited by some race not originating here on Earth since 1947, if not earlier, mm-hmm. and two, the U.S., if not other world governments, have been covering it up. one of the main things was this guy Anonymous, who testified that he was in the CIA, and Eisenhower, when he came into the presidency, there was a famous meeting apparently that happened in Edwards Air Force Base where he met a few different races. And so, of course, there's that briefing document from Truman to Eisenhower in 1952 that's been around for a couple decades now. What happened was one of the guys that testified, he was in a nursing home, so somebody came there with the camera, recorded him. Jeremy Corbell was the guy who recorded him. Mm-hmm. He talked about that he was in the CIA, and as you mentioned, the Department of Energy, they say that some of these installations are sovereign, and that's really scary. And what happened is Eisenhower stopped getting briefings from there, from Area 51, and he demanded that they give him briefings. So he summoned these CIA officers, this guy Anonymous, and his superior officer said, "Go to Area 51, get me some access there, or tell them I will take the First U.S. Army Division from Colorado and invade the base." How astonishing is that? Do you think that the president, who was probably putting this program together as a former Supreme Allied commander during World War II, to all of a sudden being cut out and warning us of the military-industrial complex? What do you think of that story situation?
I believe it, because at the end of the day, these people, the generals of the corporations or the the guys that work at the DOE, CIA, these guys are lifers that work there. The president is only president for the maximum of 8 years. Why would, if I know you're only gonna work for me for 8 years, I wouldn't disclose my deepest, darkest secrets, because after those 8 years, I can't control you.
That's right. That's a very, very popular theory, and I would tend to err on that side. Now,
yeah.
What do you think of this theory? I think the reason we're probably never going to get disclosure from the government is I don't think they're in the hands of the government anymore. I think the best way to hide things is put them in these private corporations, these military defense contractors,
yep,
and let them control them. That way they don't have to answer to the public.
Do you know security at these bases isn't even government anymore?
That's what I hear. That's what I was going to say. They're sovereign.
It's all private military contractors that get jobs working, at Area 51 and.
It's Wackenhut, isn't it?
I believe so. Yeah. And
which is a subsidiary of Halliburton's.
Yep. And then another base which is fascinating to me is Tonopah. Like that to me is Tonopah. Is it testing or proving grounds? They're that base. People in the town of Tonopah do not even know that there is a military base there. I was there a few years ago, and I was staying at this hotel, and I saw, full on, these guys were operators. They got the tan pants on. I mean, I have a lot of friends who were former military and are currently active military, and I can spot them, and these guys were either they were contractors or they were currently in, but there's a whole. Tonopah is it's just an interesting, it's all underground. There was a huge gold mine infrastructure in Tonopah, nearly 100 years ago, and they basically took over all these underground caverns that these miners built, and it's now just a giant underground military installation.
And it fits perfectly. It makes perfect sense to make it underground. That way, satellites can't see it,
yep,
and anything like that. What do you think of these amazing stories that have been told by several pilots? They'll be flying over, say, the desert or over the mountains, and all of a sudden it'll be like a zipper, and the ground will open up, the desert floor, and out fly a couple discs or cigar-shaped craft or balls, and it zips back up into desert, or same thing with the side of a mountain. What do you think about stories as they're literally hiding in plain sight?
Yeah, for me that's cloaking technology, and we have that, and we know that. I think it's some kind of, I don't necessarily think the ground is opening up versus they're pulling down the cloaking device. I know, a friend of mine, I have a lot of weird friends. Sorry, my friends always joke that I know this one guy, but I have a lot of friends in varying kind of industries. And my friend he works in the defense industry. He builds boats, and they built a boat which completely disappears. You literally, it's a stealth craft. It disappears on radar. And to the eye, you cannot see it because of the way that they can bend and bounce light off of the ocean. When you get up close to it, you can see there's an outline of something. But he literally has a way to make boats vanish. So I got to think that if my friend and his family business have this technology, imagine what billions and billions of dollars can create. And yeah, why not make an installation disappear from the air, like to where you can't see it?
And let me throw two other things at you. What do you think of the fact that, first of all, that you have these cloaking devices, and that the other fact that over 5,000 patents have been seized by under the auspices of national security?
It makes sense to me, especially in the post 9/11 world that we live in, where our defense budget is double that of what is it? Is it double of the entire world combined?
It's something ridiculous. I know that.
Like that's what this country, essentially, the military-industrial complex, is now the backbone of this country. It makes sense that they would just essentially eminent domain kind of concepts, like and patents and ideas, because they can.
And then, of course, there's the other aspect that so we do have this giant budget, but then there's the hidden budget, these unacknowledged black projects. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, you build a hammer for $20,000, toilet seat for $50,000, and funnel that money into God knows where, and boom, there you got it. What do you think of that?
Talking on black budgets, Special Operation Detachment Delta Force is technically a black budget. It is not officially recognized, and their budget their budget alone is massive. So I think it's been going on since World War II, and will continue to go on, and it's just the way that I think people figured out a way to take advantage of taxpayer dollars.
It's really a truly scary thought when we think about what can happen and around this world. We got a couple minutes to break, and I want to take advantage of you. I know you have to go.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm in the zone right now, so that's I'm fired up.
Okay. Well, you let me know whenever you're ready to go. Let me ask you this: what can we do to raise awareness? This is exactly why I asked you on this program. I just thought it's so important to take advantage of the fact that people follow you, people look up to you.
For me, it's stop the crazy. Yes. I think when you start seeing people doing crazy things and they coming out and saying all sorts of madness, and it's clear that person is not being truthful and whatever. The only way you get someone to believe you is to be believable. And for me, I think it's so many times where you're like, oh wow, there's people are starting to make valid points, and people are starting to open up and listen, and then you get some lunatic being like, oh yeah, they're coming for me and I'm being followed and this and that, and it's like, all right, I know plenty of crackheads who also think they're being followed. It's illogical. So I think it all comes in how we continue to deliver the message, in a concise way. I thought the way that Foster Gamble did thrive in such a way that was thought out, it was educated. It wasn't, he touched on a lot. He spent so much time talking about the existence of extraterrestrials and the fact that we, that we probably are in contact with them to some degree. He didn't spend too much time on that because he was trying to paint a bigger picture. And I think whereas a lot of people could watch that film, I watched it with my mother-in-law, and she didn't really respond very well to the UFO stuff, but talking about how the planet is run from the big bank kind of hierarchy with the military and education and agriculture, she was like, wow, that's really amazing, and that's so enlightening. So I think it's all in how we deliver the message.
What do you think of the fact that through Freedom of Information Act, there have been documents released by the CIA that have literally put a policy of ridicule. If you cannot attack the actual sighting, attack the person.
Of course. Why not? It's what we always do it. We do it on every level. And even on a society, on a small scale in work environment. Like if people take an office, for instance, they don't, I don't like that guy. He's, he said something to me and I don't like him. So the shaming begins, and you can start, that's how you it's like a pack of dogs. You know, you figure out a way how to kick out the one you don't like. And
yes.
I just think that's why wouldn't the government do that?
And this is why there's so many people that have genuine experiences are afraid to come forward and be rightfully so. I see why, because they're going to be ridiculed by everyone around them, be labeled as crackpots when, you know, alien abduction really has no bounds. You know, when they've done the research on it, John Mack, a famous Harvard professor, I don't know if you knew about him. Sadly, he passed away, or he was hit by a drunk driver after leaving a pub in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And some people think that, well, he was killed on purpose. Other things that it was just a pure accident. But he said that literally, it doesn't matter what race you are, if you're gay, straight, young, old, white, black, rich, poor, it transcends everything. And when you look at it that way, then you really can't label, the entire group. Of course, as we said, there's a lot of people in there that just want to belong, a lot of people that are making it up, and a lot of people that just have not quite all the marbles in their head,
mm-hmm.
missing a few. And when you think of it on that scale, and you have so many of these millions of people around the earth, literally, the Roper poll in 1991 said 1 in 40 people have been abducted, and probably a lot of people don't even know about it.
Yeah. I mean, man, that's a large number.
Very large, staggering.
I mean,
number.
that's billions.
Almost. It's hundreds of millions. That's absolutely for sure. Definitely in the 100 millions, because if we have about 7 billion people here, divide that by 40, that is an astonishing number.
1 in 40. Oh, I thought you said 1 in 4.
No. 1 in 40. 40. Yeah. That's an insane number. Number. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's why not? Listen, I can't imagine. We've probably tagged more sharks than that. We've probably done research on more animals than that, as humans, with our own animals on the planet. So I'm of the mindset of anything is plausible, anything is possible, and, so be it.
I agree. I definitely agree. And I don't know what else we can do except raise awareness, just to continue raise awareness. Can we ask you a favor?
Sure.
Of all the people that have more star power, that can make a difference and raise awareness, since people genuinely look up to them, is there anybody you could reach out to speak out publicly?
It's a strange thing, because I often will, I'm a big into conspiracy theories, or conspiracy facts, as sometimes I like to call them, and it's tough because I talk to friends about stuff, whether it's a 9/11 theory or UFOs or Roswell, and I do try and communicate it, but you run the risk of people being like, oh, he's just a bit of a nutcase. And people are very much worried about, because the friends that I do know who are public figures, their public image is what makes them money. So they don't want to alienate themselves by thinking, people thinking they're nuts, because they might be interested, but they might not be passionate. And I very much am passionate about this, so I feel okay with talking about it, and I feel like my the way that I choose to engage in this realm, if you will, is a little more, grounded. I'm not running around being like, oh, they're coming for us, build a bunker and, and get a tinfoil hat. Like, I often take the ground of like, I believe, just as someone might believe that, the earth is only 6,000 years old and we were created, in the Garden of Eden.
That's right.
Why is that such a, wow, that is fact, and hundreds of millions of people believe, billions of people believe that, and so why is that acceptable? But yet the notion that we essentially, star children, why is that not? So I like to take a bit of a neutral approach with it, and how I talk to friends, and But I have discussions with individuals all the time, and it's, and when I have a way to kind of present facts along with not just theories. This keeps popping into my head, and I know I'm probably going to wrap up in a minute, but I kind of want to end with this story. A friend of mine who was a producer a long time ago in entertainment and television, he was heavily involved in researching, UFOs and everything, and he told me, he became very very religious. He went to seminary school, and he was a pastor for a while, and he had, he began to really just focus a lot of his energy in that area. And I asked him, I was like, well, how do you believe so heavily in God and and the kind of the story of Jesus and the Bible? Like, how is that the backbone of your life now, knowing what you know about UFOs and aliens? And he told me this really interesting story. He said that, and I don't know, I'd never heard this, and you may have. He said that there was a UFO crash in the late 70s, and when the government recovered the spacecraft and opened it up, they found there was beings inside, and these beings were deceased, and they ran early DNA tests on these beings, and they were a lot taller than humans, slender, they had no hair, and their eyes were a little bit bigger than ours. They weren't your typical, like, almond-shaped big black eyes, as he described them. And he said that these beings, the data came back that their DNA was human. And when they started picking apart the spacecraft, they learned that this race of humans had colonized other worlds, and with less gravity and less light, so their eyes were bigger and they grew to be a little bit taller. And that in researching, this race, because of the information they got from the spacecraft, that they were time travelers, and it was proof to him that the Earth and the data that they recovered from this spacecraft, that the world had been destroyed, and that essentially revelations had occurred. Like, the book of Revelation was true. And for him, he said, it scared me so much, I felt that I had to, really dive into the spiritual realm and try and understand, who we are amongst the kind of ocean of chaos.
I'm really glad you brought that up. Hopefully some other time we could talk about that topic, because a lot of people talk about the fact that, one, we ourselves, human, Homo sapiens, are hybrids in that we are a mixture of a bunch of different species placed together from different races around the universe or multiverse. And more importantly, just like you said, that we have been seeded on other planets to evolve. With that being said, Jack, I got to honestly thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is an honor to call you my friend, and I really look forward to working with you. I'm going to air some private stuff to you. I just got to thank you again, and congratulate you and your wife for your new daughter.
Thank you very much.
Make that very publicly, and keep up the good work, and honestly, we look forward to having you back on again. It would just be more power to raise awareness to the people, and I think that's exactly what you did tonight. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, thank you, Dr. John. I appreciate it.
Anytime, my friend, anytime.
This is Foster Gamble, and you are listening to Dr. J Radio Live.